The global energy crisis, inflation crisis and economic crisis caused by the pandemic and the war in Ukraine, and how they affect the U.K. economy and living standards. The year 2022 has been marked by a series of crises that have shaken the world economy and threatened the well-being of millions of people. Among them, three stand out: the global energy crisis, the inflation crisis and the economic crisis caused by the pandemic and the war in Ukraine. In this section, we will explore how these crises have affected the U.K. economy and living standards, and what the Chancellor plans to do to relieve them. The global energy crisis refers to the situation of soaring energy prices and supply shortages that have hit many countries, especially in Europe. The crisis was caused by a variety of factors, including the rapid post-pandemic economic rebound that outpaced energy supply, the disruption of supply chains by COVID-19 and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the lack of investment in renewable energy sources. According to the International Energy Agency, the world is in the middle of a global energy crisis of unprecedented depth and complexity. The U.K. has been one of the hardest-hit countries by the energy crisis, as it relies heavily on imported natural gas from Europe and Russia. The wholesale price of gas in the U.K. has increased by more than 500% since January 2022, leading to higher bills for households and businesses, and forcing many energy suppliers to go bankrupt. The government has intervened to protect consumers from price hikes, but this has added to its fiscal burden. The energy crisis has also affected electricity generation, as gas-fired power plants have struggled to meet demand. This has increased the risk of blackouts and forced the government to rely more on coal and nuclear power, which are more polluting and expensive. The inflation crisis refers to the situation of rising prices for goods and services across an economy. Inflation reduces the purchasing power of money and erodes living standards. Inflation can be caused by various factors, such as excess demand, supply shocks, currency depreciation or expansionary monetary policy. In 2022, inflation has emerged as one of the biggest threats to global prosperity. The U.K. has experienced a surge in inflation in 2022, reaching 7.5% in November, the highest level since the main drivers of inflation in the U.K. have been higher energy and food prices, as well as supply chain disruptions caused by COVID-19 and Brexit. The Bank of England has raised interest rates twice in 2022 to try to curb inflation, but this has also increased borrowing costs for households and businesses. The high inflation rate has eroded the real incomes of workers and pensioners, who have not seen their wages or benefits keep up with price increases. The economic crisis refers to the situation of low growth, high unemployment and rising poverty that have affected many countries due to the pandemic and its aftermath. The pandemic has caused unprecedented damage to the global economy, as lockdowns, social distancing and travel restrictions have disrupted production, trade and consumption. The war in Ukraine has added to the economic woes, as it has increased geopolitical uncertainty, disrupted trade flows and triggered sanctions between Russia and Western countries. The U.K. has suffered a severe economic shock from the pandemic and its consequences. The UK's GDP contracted by 9.8% in 2020, the worst performance among G7 countries. The recovery in 2021 was uneven and fragile, as new variants of COVID-19 and Brexit-related issues hampered growth. The war in Ukraine has also weighed on the UK's economic prospects, as it has reduced trade with Europe and Russia, increased military spending and heightened security risks. The UK's unemployment rate rose to 5% in 2021, while poverty increased by 1.5 million people between 2019 and these three crises have posed serious challenges for the UK's economy and living standards, as well as for its fiscal and monetary policy. In response, the Chancellor has announced a series of measures to relieve the economy from inflation and high taxes, while supporting growth and recovery. These measures include a temporary cut in VAT for energy bills from 5% to 0% until March 2023, to help households cope with higher energy costs. A permanent increase in the personal allowance from £12,570 to £13,000 from April 2023, to reduce income tax for low and middle-income earners. A reduction in corporation tax from 19% to 18% from April 2023, to boost business investment and competitiveness. A £10 billion fund for green infrastructure projects over 5 years, to increase renewable energy capacity and reduce carbon emissions. A £5 billion fund for skills training over 5 years, to improve workers' productivity and employability. A £3 billion fund for social care over 5 years, to improve the quality and affordability of care services for elderly and disabled people. The Chancellor hopes that these measures will ease the pressure on households and businesses from rising prices and taxes, while stimulating growth and recovery in a sustainable way. However, he also acknowledges that these measures will not solve all the problems facing the UK's economy and society, and that more reforms are needed to address long-term challenges such as productivity, inequality, and climate change.